I landed in Nassau around noon on a Tuesday in March. The contract came through Woods Hole 3 weeks earlier, and I'd said yes before I read the whole thing. That's usually a mistake, but the header had EUTech printed right at the top, and I figured anything that specific probably had money behind it. The airport smelled like sunscreen and diesel. I grabbed my duffel and a hard case with the hydrophone gear, then found the guy holding the clipboard near baggage claim. He had on a faded polo with some charter company logo I didn't recognize. Didn't ask for my name. Didn't ask for a single thing. Just checked my face against whatever photo he had and nodded toward the exit. The supply boat was waiting at a dock maybe 20 minutes south. Small thing, 40 feet, white hull with rust spots near the waterline. 2 other passengers were already on board, both wearing contractor badges on lanyards. We didn't talk. I stowed my gear below and came back up to stand near the stern while the engine turned over. The ride to Andros took about 3 hours. Water stayed flat most of the way, just that Caribbean blue-green that doesn't look real until you're sitting in it. I watched the depth finder tick up as we cleared the shelf. One of the other passengers threw up over the rail about an hour in. The wind picked up after that, but not enough to matter. I liked this kind of work. Clean end date, clear deliverables, show up, validate some equipment, write a report, go home. Woods Hole used me for support gigs pretty often because I didn't ask a lot of questions and I didn't cost much. That suited me fine. I preferred working on other people's vessels anyway. You gotta see the setup, learn the systems, and then leave before the politics started. This one was straightforward on paper. Autech needed someone to check a spread of old undersea range gear and confirm it still matched the specs from whenever they'd installed it. Probably 10 years ago, maybe 15. The tasking document said, documentation and validation, which meant I'd spend a few days running tests, logging serial numbers, and taking photos. Easy work if the weather held. Nora Hansen's name was on the contract as the supervising researcher. I'd worked under her twice before, both times on short notice equipment checks. She ran things efficiently and didn't micromanage, which I appreciated. Her emails were always direct. This one had been 3 lines. Gordon, All-Tech validation contract. 2 weeks maximum. Confirm by Friday. I'd confirmed Thursday night. We pulled into the All-Tech dock a little before 4 in the afternoon. The facility sat low and blocky against the coastline, a mix of prefab buildings and older concrete structures that looked military. A few antenna arrays, a water tower, not much else. The guy with the clipboard handed me off to someone in Navy Utilities who checked my ID again and gave me a key card and a site map printed on regular paper. My bunk was in one of the contractor buildings near the north end. Single room, narrow bed, a desk, a window that faced the parking lot. I dropped my duffel and unpacked the hydrophone case to make sure nothing had cracked during the flight. Everything looked fine. The unit was a simple portable rig, good for baseline acoustic checks and not much else. I'd brought it because Nora's tasking sheet mentioned preliminary signal validation, and I figured I'd start with a few ambient recordings before I touched any of the permanent array. I ate in the commissary around 6. Fish and rice. The only other people there were 2 women in civilian clothes who didn't look up when I sat down. After that, I walked back to my room and read through the rest of the tasking document. It listed 6 pieces of gear by serial number, all hydrophones or transponders, all supposedly still active. My job was to confirm they powered on, check their frequency response, and verify their positions matched the installation records. 2 weeks felt generous for that, but I wasn't going to argue. That night I couldn't sleep. Happens sometimes in new places. I got up around 10 and pulled on my jacket and boots and walked down to the pier with the hydrophone rig in a backpack. The water was dead calm. No boat traffic. No lights except the ones on the dock and a few scattered across the main building. I set the hydrophone down near the edge and ran the cable back to the recording unit, then clipped the whole thing to the pier railing so it wouldn't slide. The unit had a small screen that showed live input, just a waveform and a frequency readout. I powered it on and watched the baseline settle. Mostly quiet, some low hum, probably mechanical, maybe from a pump or generator somewhere on shore. A few transient clicks that could have been anything. I let it run for a couple of minutes and started thinking about going back to the room. Then I felt it before I heard it. A clean, whistle-like tone that came up through the water and hit me in the chest. Low frequency, maybe 60 or 70 hertz, and it carried in that way subsonic stuff does, where your body registers it before your ears catch up. I looked at the screen. The waveform had spiked, smooth and symmetrical, holding steady for about 4 seconds before it dropped off. I figured it was a calibration ping. Autech ran an underwater range, so they probably sent test signals all the time. I checked the duration and pitch, both clean, no modulation, no drift, just a pure tone. Then it happened again, same pitch, same duration, 4 seconds, maybe a little less. I waited for a third, but the water stayed quiet. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app, logged the time and the rough frequency. No clear bearing, which bugged me a little. Normally you could tell direction if you had even a halfway decent hydrophone setup, but this thing was coming from everywhere and nowhere. That happened sometimes with reflections, especially if the bottom was flat and hard. I sent a test sequence, just 3 short pulses, standard spacing, nothing fancy. The kind of thing you'd use to check if a transponder was awake and listening. The water gave it back to me. Not right away. Maybe 10 seconds later. But it was my sequence, stretched out and wrong. The pulses were there, same count, same order, but the timing was off and the tone had this wobble to it, like someone had copied a recording through a bad speaker. I played it back twice to make sure. Yeah, definitely my sequence. Definitely wrong. I logged it, wrote down the delay, the distortion, everything I could remember. Then I packed up the rig and carried it back to my room. I didn't know what it meant, but it felt like something I should mention. The next morning I found Aiden Brooks in the operations building. He was the Navy liaison listed on my site paperwork, and his office was a small room with a desk and a metal filing cabinet and a window that looked out at the water. He was typing something when I knocked. Yeah, I stepped in. Gordon Rush, Woods Hole contractor. He glanced up. Dark eyes, close-cropped hair, that squared-off military posture, even sitting down. Right, you're the validation guy. Yeah, I ran some baseline checks last night and picked up something weird. He didn't say anything, just looked at me. I pulled out my phone and showed him the notes. Clean whistle tone, repeated twice. Then I sent a test sequence and got it back distorted. No clear bearing on any of it. Aiden looked at the screen for maybe 3 seconds. Then he handed the phone back. Probably a glitch in your rig. It's not the rig. Then it's bounce off the shelf. We get that sometimes. I didn't push it. He clearly didn't care, and I wasn't here to argue about acoustic anomalies. I just wanted it on record in case it came up again. Stick to the schedule, Aiden said. You've got the serial list? Yeah. Good. Start with the northern array. We'll have a boat ready at 0800. That was it. I left and went back to my room to prep the gear. Aiden met me at the dock at 7:50. Earlier than I expected, but that seemed to be how things worked here. He was already in the skiff, a 16-footer with an outboard and a canvas bag wedged under the front bench. Morning, I said. He nodded. We're skipping the northern array. I stopped halfway through stepping into the boat. The schedule said, change of plan. He didn't look up from the rope he was coiling. Need you to check an older node first. Visual confirmation. I sat down on the rear bench and set my pack between my feet. The hydrophone rig was inside, plus the handheld GPS and a backup data logger I'd packed out of habit. Which node? SW7. It's near the restricted buoy line. He started the engine. It caught on the second pull, settling into a rough idle. Went quiet 2 days ago. Probably corrosion, maybe a bad seal. That sounded routine enough. Nodes failed all the time. Saltwater found every weak point eventually. I figured we'd pull it up, I'd document the damage, and we'd swap it for a replacement if Aiden had one in the canvas bag. You have the serial specs for it? I asked. On my phone. He backed us away from the dock, then turned south along the coastline. The water was flat, almost no wind. I could see the bottom clearly for the first 30 feet or so, pale sand with scattered coral heads and patches of dark grass. The sun was already warm on my neck. We motored out for maybe 15 minutes. The coastline shrank behind us, and the water deepened to that blue-black color that meant the shelf was ending. Aiden steered with one hand and kept his phone in the other, checking it every minute or so. I didn't ask what he was looking at. Probably a navigation app or the node's last known position. Ahead, I spotted a line of yellow buoys spaced maybe 200 feet apart. They bobbed gently, each one trailing a thin cable down into the water. That's the line, Aiden said. He throttled back. We're heading just inside it. I pulled out my GPS and marked our position. The restricted buoy line wasn't on any of the maps I'd been given, but that wasn't surprising. Autech didn't publish half its infrastructure. Aiden cut the engine to an idle and let us drift forward. He scanned the water like he was looking for something specific. A minute passed, then another. There, he said, pointing to a spot maybe 50 yards out. I didn't see anything, just water. He restarted the engine and steered us toward it. As we got closer, I caught a glint of metal maybe 10 feet down, a cylindrical housing about the size of a fire extinguisher, mounted on a frame that was bolted to the seabed. No buoy, no surface marker. Just the node itself, sitting there in the open water. That's SW7, Aiden said. He killed the engine. The silence felt sudden. No wind, no waves. Just the faint creak of the skiff and the occasional slap of water against the hull. You need me to freedive it? I asked. Not yet. I want to get a radio call in first. Let them know we're on site. He reached under the bench and pulled out a handheld VHF. He keyed the mic twice, then spoke. Autech Ops, this is Brooks, on site at SW7, conducting visual check. Confirm receipt. Static hissed from the speaker. He waited 5 seconds and tried again. Autech Ops, Brooks, radio check. More static. Then a faint crackle, but no voice. I watched him try a third time. Same result. He frowned and adjusted the squelch, then keyed the mic again. That's when I heard it. The static cut out and the speaker emitted a clean whistle tone, low and steady, maybe 60 hertz. It lasted half a second, then chopped into 3 quick bursts. Same pitch, same smoothness, then silence. Aiden stared at the radio. That's the tone from last night, I said. He didn't respond. He keyed the mic again. The static returned, but underneath it I could hear the whistle faintly, like it was bleeding through from another channel. He lowered the radio and clipped it back to his belt. We'll call from the platform. What platform? He pointed east. I followed his gaze and spotted a small square structure maybe a quarter-mile out. A maintenance platform, probably. Solar panels on top, metal ladder on one side. Engine trouble? I asked. No. Radio trouble. He reached for the ignition. The outboard coughed once, sputtered, and died. Aiden tried again. It turned over but wouldn't catch. He adjusted the choke and pulled the cord 3 more times. Nothing. I looked at the fuel line. It was connected. No kinks, no obvious leaks. When did you last run it? I asked. Yesterday. He kept pulling the cord. On the 6th try, the engine coughed again and died immediately. That's when I noticed the water. It was rolling. Not choppy, rolling. Long, slow swells that lifted the skiff maybe a foot, then lowered it just as gently. The cycle was perfectly regular. 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down. I looked at the sky, still clear. No clouds, no wind. The swells didn't match anything. There was no storm offshore, no reason for the water to move in that kind of rhythm. It felt wrong, mechanical almost. Aiden stopped pulling the cord. He was looking at the water, too. Current? I said. No current moves like that. The next swell lifted us. I felt my stomach dip as we crested and started down the other side. It was smooth. Too smooth. We're drifting toward the platform, Aiden said. His voice was flat, controlled. We'll use the landline there. I didn't argue. The skiff was already moving east, carried by the swells. Aiden pulled the oars out from under the bench and fitted them into the locks, then started rowing to speed us up. He didn't say anything else. I kept my eyes on the water. The swells continued, 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down. I counted 6 cycles, then stopped. My chest felt tight. The platform grew larger as we approached. It was older than I'd expected. Rust streaks down the support legs, barnacles crusted along the waterline. The deck was maybe 8 feet square, with a waist-high railing and a metal equipment cabinet bolted to one corner. Solar panels covered the roof, intact and unbroken. The ladder looked solid. Aiden rowed us alongside and grabbed one of the support legs to steady us. "Hold it there," he said. I reached up and gripped the railing while he secured the painter to a cleat welded to the nearest leg. The skiff bumped against the platform twice, then settled. Aiden climbed up first. I handed him his canvas bag, then followed with my pack. The deck was smaller than it had looked from the water, maybe 6 feet by 8. The solar panels overhead provided some shade, but the air felt hot and still. I could smell rust and old paint, and something else, something damp and organic, like seaweed left out too long. The equipment cabinet was mounted on the eastern corner. It was one of those weatherproof boxes, probably fiberglass, with a hasp and padlock, except the door was hanging open. Aiden saw it at the same time I did. He walked over and stopped a foot away. I came up beside him and looked inside. The cabinet was wet, not damp, wet. Water pooled at the bottom, maybe an inch deep, and the whole interior glistened like someone had just poured a bucket straight into it. The equipment inside, a radio transceiver, a battery pack, some kind of junction box, was soaked. Salt water, from the look of the corrosion already forming on the terminals. "That wasn't from spray," I said. Aiden didn't answer. He crouched down and examined the hasp. It wasn't broken. The padlock was missing entirely, but the hasp itself was intact. No pry marks, no damage. I stepped back and scanned the rest of the deck. That's when I saw the footprints. They were faint, pressed into a thin layer of gritty residue, probably salt and dried algae, that covered most of the deck. But they were there. Bare feet. 5 prints in a loose line leading from the ladder to the cabinet. I knelt down next to the clearest one. The toes were long. Too long. The big toe was offset from the others in a way that didn't look right, and the weight distribution was wrong. Most of the impression was at the ball of the foot and the outer edge, with almost nothing at the heel, like whoever made it had been walking on their toes. I pulled out my phone and took 2 photos. The prints were maybe 10 inches long, narrow, with those weird toes splayed out at odd angles. "You see this?" I asked. Aiden was still crouched by the cabinet. He glanced over, looked at the prints for maybe 2 seconds, then stood up. "Someone came out here to check the equipment," he said. "Probably maintenance." "Barefoot?" He didn't answer. He pulled the radio from his belt and tried it again. The speaker hissed, then went silent. No whistle this time. Just dead air. I looked back at the footprints. They didn't make sense. OTEC staff didn't do maintenance barefoot, and even if they did, feet didn't look like that. The gait was off. The proportions were wrong. Aiden clipped the radio back to his belt. "We're drifting back. We'll row to shore and report from ops." I stood up and checked the skiff. He was right. We drifted maybe 15 feet from the platform already, still moving on those slow, regular swells. He climbed down the ladder first. I took one last look at the footprints, then followed. Aiden was still looking at the footprints when I took the second photo. He didn't say anything this time. didn't repeat the maintenance line. He just stood there with his hands on his hips, staring at the deck for probably 10 seconds, then turned and walked to the railing facing south. I watched him scan the water, not casual, methodical. He moved his head in sections, checking quadrants, started at the platform legs, worked outward to the buoy line, then past it to open water. His jaw was tight. He gripped the railing with both hands. "What are we looking for?" I said. He didn't answer. I walked over and stood next to him. The swells were still rolling in that same 5-second rhythm. Up, down, up, down. Perfect spacing. The water was clear enough that I could see maybe 20 feet down near the platform legs, then it dropped off into that blue-black nothing. No shapes, no movement. Just the barnacles and a few strands of kelp swaying with the current that shouldn't have existed. "Aiden, we should go," he said. Didn't look at me. Agreed. But he didn't move. He kept scanning. His knuckles were white on the railing. I waited. Counted 3 more swell cycles. My chest was still tight from earlier, and standing there doing nothing wasn't helping. I wanted to be off the platform. Wanted to be back on shore. Wanted to be anywhere that didn't involve bare footprints with the wrong number of joints. Finally, Aiden let go of the railing and turned toward the ladder. "Let's move." I followed him to the edge. He climbed down first, same as before. I waited until he was in the skiff, then swung my leg over and started down. The ladder was slick. Rust flaked off under my palms. Halfway down, I glanced at the water again and saw nothing. Just swells, just blue. I dropped into the skiff and Aiden was already fitting the oars into the locks. He didn't try the outboard again, just started rowing without a word. We were maybe 30 feet from the platform when I remembered the radio. It was still clipped to Aiden's belt. He'd tried it twice on the platform, once inside by the cabinet, once outside by the railing, and gotten nothing but dead air. No static, no whistle, just silence. I don't know why I asked. Maybe because the silence felt worse than the whistle. Maybe because I wanted to confirm it was actually broken and not just selective about when it worked. "Try it again," I said. Aiden stopped rowing. He looked at me, then down at the radio on his belt. He unclipped it and held it up between us. "Already tried," he said. "I know, try it again." He pressed the talk button, held it for 2 seconds, released. Nothing. He clipped it back to his belt and reached for the oars. That's when the radio clicked, just once, sharp and metallic, loud enough that we both heard it. Aiden froze. His hand was halfway to the oar. I stared at the radio. It was still clipped to his belt. The talk button wasn't pressed. His hand wasn't touching it. Then it started transmitting. No button press, no static buildup, just a clean open channel. The sound that came through wasn't the whistle. It was worse. It sounded like a voice, calm, even, but wrong. There was static underneath it, yeah, but there was something else too. Something that made my teeth hurt. A kind of wetness to the tone. A layered quality, like 2 people talking at once but not quite in sync. It said 25.379 minus 77.882 coordinates. Then it said approach. That was it. The transmission cut. The radio went silent. I looked at Aiden. His face had gone blank. Not confused, not surprised. Just blank in the way people get when they're working very hard not to react. "You know those coordinates," I said. He didn't answer. He picked up the oars and started rowing again, harder this time. "Aiden." "Yeah," he said. "I know them." "Where?" He rowed for another 3 strokes before answering. "Cable access point, shoreside, about a mile south of the main dock." "What's a cable access point?" "Concrete hatch, old infrastructure, ties into the undersea network." He kept rowing, didn't look at me. "The tunnels," I said. That got his attention. He stopped rowing and stared at me. What tunnels? You just said it ties into the undersea network. That means tunnels, conduits, whatever you want to call them. He looked away, started rowing again. It's sealed, has been for years. Then why would something want us to go there? I don't know. I didn't believe him. His voice was too flat, too controlled, the kind of control that comes from lying badly and knowing it. I leaned forward. Aiden, what is this actually about? He rowed for maybe 10 more strokes. The platform was behind us now. The coastline was getting closer. I could see the main dock in the distance, small and gray against the green. Finally, he shipped the oars and let the skiff drift. He sat there for a second, hands on his knees, staring at the bottom of the boat. This isn't just validation work, he said. I waited. We had a diver go missing last season. Petty Officer Dale Gonzalez. He was doing maintenance on one of the southern nodes and didn't surface. We searched for 3 days. Found his tank and fins washed up near the cable point. Nothing else. And you didn't mention this because it's not your job. Your job is to check the gear and confirm it matches the install specs. That's it. Then why am I here? He looked up at me. Because the gear started acting wrong after Dale went missing. Signals looping. Whistle tones where there shouldn't be any. The range talking back. He paused. Navy wants to confirm and contain. They want to know what's down there and whether it stays down there. I sat back. My chest was tight again. You're telling me this is a recovery mission? No, Dale's gone. This is a containment mission. Containment of what? I don't know. There it was again. That flat voice. That bad lie. I looked toward the shore. We'd drifted maybe another 20 feet. The swells were still regular, still wrong. We need to go back, I said. Get a full crew, proper equipment. Do this in daylight with backup. Aiden shook his head. Can't wait. Why not? Because if the range is talking back, someone else might be listening. And if someone else is listening, we lose containment before we even know what we're containing. Someone else meaning who? Foreign monitoring. Commercial salvage. Doesn't matter. What matters is, this stays internal. I stared at him. You're saying we need to respond to that transmission right now because you're worried about eavesdroppers? Yes. That's insane. That's the job. I looked at the radio, still clipped to his belt. It hadn't made a sound since the transmission. Just sat there, silent and harmless looking. I'm a contractor, I said. I check hydrophones. I don't do containment work. I don't do search and rescue. I especially don't do whatever this is. Aiden picked up the oars again. You signed the contract. You're here. And right now, you're the only technical resource I have. He started rowing toward shore, toward the coordinates. So you're doing containment work. I didn't argue, didn't agree either. I just sat there and watched the coastline get closer and tried to figure out how badly I'd screwed up by confirming on a Thursday night without reading the fine print. Aiden grabbed the starter cord and yanked. Hard. The kind of pull that's half mechanics and half just refusing to accept no. The outboard coughed, caught, died. He yanked again. Same result. Third pull, the engine turned over and held. Rough idle, sputtering every few seconds, but running. Aiden didn't look at me. Just shipped the oars and took the tiller. I didn't ask what changed. Maybe nothing. Maybe the engine was always going to start and it just needed spite as fuel. We turned south and motored parallel to the coast. The swells kept their rhythm, 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down. I stopped counting after a while because it didn't help and because my chest still felt tight every time I thought about it too long. Aiden steered one-handed, the radio still clipped to his belt. He didn't try it again, neither did I. The coastline slid past, scrub and limestone shelf, a few patches of mangrove where the rock dipped low enough. No buildings, no markers, just the kind of empty stretch that says the Navy owns it and doesn't want you here. I kept my pack between my feet, and watched the water. Clear enough near shore to see bottom, sand and scattered rock, some kelp anchored in the shallows. Depth maybe 12 feet, 15 max. Nothing moving except the kelp swaying wrong, all of it tilting the same direction at the same time, synchronized to the swells. Aiden throttled back after maybe 10 minutes. We were drifting toward a low outcrop where the scrub thickened and the limestone humped up above the tide line. He nosed the skiff in close, killed the engine 20 feet out, and let momentum carry us to a flat section of rock. I grabbed the edge and steadied us while Aiden tied off to a rusted cleat somebody had drilled into the stone a long time ago. The cleat held, barely. Aiden climbed out first with the canvas bag. I followed with my pack. The rock was dry but pitted, covered in salt crust and bird shit. It crunched under my boots. I could smell dead seaweed and something chemical underneath, faint but sharp. Old fuel maybe, or treated runoff. Aiden walked inland without waiting. I followed. 30 feet up from the water, behind a tangle of scrub and a low limestone ridge, the hatch sat flat against the rock. It was maybe 3 feet square, heavy steel painted navy gray about 15 years ago and now mostly rust and salt stain. Stenciled letters across the top read, U.S. Navy in faded white. Below that, a confined space warning triangle with the color bleached out to almost nothing. The hatch had a recessed handle on one side and a hasp on the other. The padlock was cut, not missing, not broken off. Cut clean through the shackle with bolt cutters or a hacksaw, the two pieces still threaded through the hasp like somebody wanted you to know it had been opened on purpose. I crouched next to it and touched the cut edge. Smooth. Recent enough that the steel hadn't started blooming rust yet. When was this last inspected? I asked. Aiden stood over me, staring at the lock. 6 months ago. Maybe more. Lock was intact then? Should have been. I stood and looked around. No footprints in the salt crust, but the rock was too hard to hold them anyway. No trash, no tool marks, nothing else disturbed. Just the cut lock. Somebody staged this, I said. Aiden didn't answer. He bent down, pulled the cut lock free, and tossed it into the scrub. Then he grabbed the recessed handle and pulled. The hatch lifted with a metal groan. Hinges on the far side, counterweight doing most of the work. It swung up and locked vertical, exposing a dark square and the top of a steel ladder disappearing down. The smell hit me right away. Damp concrete, salt, old battery acid, something organic rotting slow in the dark. I pulled my headlamp from the pack and clicked it on. Aiden already had his. "Stay close," he said, and started down. The ladder dropped maybe 12 feet into a short tunnel. Concrete floor, concrete walls, low ceiling with conduit running the length. My headlamp caught water stains and patches of white mineral buildup where the walls wept. Aiden moved ahead without stopping. I stayed 3 feet behind him, sweeping my light across the walls and ceiling out of habit. The tunnel bent left after 20 feet and opened into a wider space. Equipment room maybe 8 by 10, ceiling just tall enough to stand upright if you didn't mind brushing the conduit. Old stuff and new stuff mixed together. Conduit from the 60s or 70s, thick and painted industrial gray, running next to fiber optic bundles clipped to the wall with modern plastic mounts. Water lines sweating condensation. A junction box the size of a briefcase bolted to the wall near the back, its cover missing and the guts exposed. Terminal strips, wire nuts, corrosion on half the connections. The smell was stronger here. Batteries and salt and wet concrete, plus something else I couldn't place. Mildew maybe, or algae growing somewhere I couldn't see. Aiden stopped in the middle of the room and turned a slow circle with his headlamp, checking every corner. I did the same. No footprints. No trash. No signs anyone had been down here except for the fact that the hatch had been unlocked from the outside. "This connects to the network?" I asked. "Used to. Fiber runs are newer. Conduit's legacy." "Legacy what?" Older system, analog, decommissioned when they upgraded. But still here. Still here. I stepped closer to the junction box and aimed my light inside. Half the terminals were crusted with white and green corrosion. The other half looked clean, which didn't make sense unless somebody had been maintaining part of it and ignoring the rest. I pulled my phone and took a photo, then another of the conduit where it entered the wall. Aiden watched, but didn't stop me. "We documenting now?" he asked. "Site's compromised. Somebody cut that lock. I'm documenting." He didn't argue. A doorway at the back of the room opened into another tunnel. Narrower this time, maybe 4 feet wide, ceiling lower. The conduit followed the left wall. Fiber ran along the right. Aiden ducked through and kept moving. I followed. 50 feet in, I heard it again. The whistle. Same tone. Same clean 60 to 70 hertz pitch. No buildup, no fade. Just there, filling the tunnel, coming from everywhere and nowhere. I stopped walking. Aiden stopped too, 3 feet ahead of me. He didn't turn around. The tone held for 4 seconds, then cut. Silence. My ears rang in the absence. "You heard that?" I said. "Yeah." "Where'd it come from?" "Don't know." I turned in place, sweeping my headlamp back the way we came. Concrete walls, conduit, shadows. No speaker, no equipment. Nothing that should produce sound. The tone came again. Same pitch, same duration. I felt it in my chest this time, the way you feel bass at a concert. Physical pressure, low and steady. But the frequency was wrong for that. 60 hertz doesn't move your ribs, doesn't press on your sternum. I stepped forward and the tone stayed the same distance. I stepped back and it didn't get quieter. "That's not possible," I said. Aiden finally turned to look at me. His face was blank, jaw set. "What's not possible?" "The acoustics. We're in a straight concrete tunnel. Sound should reflect, should build standing waves, should give us a direction, but it's not. It's staying even, same level no matter where I move." So that's open water behavior. Omnidirectional source in a medium with no boundaries. You don't get that in a confined space. Aiden stared at me for 2 seconds, then turned and kept walking. The tone cut out again. I followed because staying alone felt worse. The tunnel bent right, then left, then opened into another room. Bigger this time. Maybe 15 by 12, ceiling high enough that my headlamp didn't catch it at first. Water on the floor, ankle deep, cold, completely still. I stepped in and felt it soak through my boots. The smell hit harder here. Salt and rot and something chemical that burned the back of my throat. My light caught shapes mounted on the walls above the waterline. Racks of dead electronics. Old gray boxes with dials and switches, cables hanging loose, faceplates streaked with salt and corrosion. And kelp. Draped over the equipment, hanging from the cables, piled in the corners where the walls met the ceiling. Brown and slick and wrong, because kelp doesn't grow in sealed rooms and doesn't climb 15 feet up concrete walls. I moved my light slowly across the nearest rack. The kelp was fresh, still wet, strands of it dripping slow into the water below. Aiden waded to the far side of the room where a metal shelf jutted from the wall, bolted in with industrial hardware. The shelf held a plastic crate, the kind with a lid that snaps down. He pulled the crate onto the edge of the shelf and popped the lid. Inside, a binder, sealed in a clear plastic bag, the kind you use on a boat to keep paper dry. Aiden pulled the binder out, tore the bag open, and flipped it on the shelf. I waded over and aimed my light at the pages, maintenance sheets, printed forms with handwritten entries, dates going back 3 years. Equipment IDs, status codes, tech initials, standard Navy documentation. Aiden flipped past them. Halfway through the binder, the pages changed. Printed memo. Header read, Office of Naval Intelligence. Date 2 years old. classification markings redacted with black bars. Subject line, acoustic mimic, protocol deadwake. I leaned closer. The memo was 2 pages. Bullet points, concise, the kind of language that assumes you already know half the context. Do not respond to unknown acoustic signals originating from network nodes. Do not follow or attempt to locate returned signals. Do not enter access tunnels alone. Do not engage in communication with unverified sources via hydrophone or radio. Report all anomalous activity to Site Command immediately. Below that, a paragraph in smaller type. Acoustic signature exhibits adaptive behavior. Mimic has demonstrated capacity to replicate human speech patterns, equipment signals, and environmental sounds with increasing accuracy. Learning rate accelerates with exposure. Isolation protocols remain in effect until containment is confirmed. I read it twice. Aiden turned the page. Clipped to the back of the memo, a handwritten note on lined paper. Blue ink, hurried script. It said, "Mimic learns faster when you ignore it." That was it. I stood there in ankle-deep water, staring at the note, while my headlamp beam made the wet kelp glisten on the walls. I turned to leave. Aiden did too. We both aimed our headlamps back toward the tunnel we'd just crossed. The corridor was dry. Not drying, not draining. Dry. I stopped walking. Aiden kept going 3 steps before he noticed and turned back. The water we'd waded through 60 seconds ago was gone. The ankle-deep cold that had soaked my boots and made every step slow, just gone. The floor was damp concrete now, darker in patches where moisture still clung, but no pooling, no ripples, no standing water at all. I looked down at my boots, still wet, water still dripping off the rubber onto dry concrete. "You see this?" I said. Aiden's headlamp swept the floor. He didn't answer right away. Where the water had been, there were footprints instead. Wet prints. Bare feet. The same narrow shape from the platform. Long toes. Wrong weight distribution. Ball and outer edge pressed dark into the damp concrete. They led away from us, deeper into the facility, following the corridor we hadn't taken yet. I counted 7 prints before my headlamp beam couldn't reach any farther. "We're leaving," I said. Aiden stared at the prints. His jaw worked, but nothing came out for 3 seconds. "We need to confirm Dale's gear first," he said. "No, we don't. That's why we're here." I turned to face him full on. "The water moved, Aiden. It was here, now it's not. The floor rearranged itself while we were standing in it." "I know. So we leave. We go back up, we call this in, we get people who know what the hell this is." Aiden shook his head. Slow, deliberate. "Can't leave without confirming the gear." "Yes, you can. You just walk." "Navy wants confirmation. Dale's equipment, serial numbers, proof of what happened." I felt my chest tighten, not panic, anger. "You don't care about serial numbers. You care about what took him." Aiden didn't deny it. He looked past me, down the corridor where the footprints led. "Coordinates put us at a storage bay," he said. 60 feet that direction. We confirm, we document, we leave. Or we leave now and nobody confirms anything. Your contract says... My contract says validation. This isn't validation. This is containment, remember? And I'm not trained for containment. Aiden met my eyes. His headlamp made his face look carved out, shadows pooling under his brows and jaw. "You're the only one here who understands the gear. You're the only one who can tell me if what's down here is his or if it's something else wearing his stuff." That stopped me. I didn't want it to, but it did. Because he was right. If something could mimic Nora's voice, if it could copy a radio transmission, layer it wrong, make it wet, it could probably stage a scene. Put together a pile of equipment that looked right, but wasn't. And if Aiden went in alone, he wouldn't know the difference. I looked at the footprints again. They didn't waver, didn't overlap, just a steady line leading deeper, like someone walking with purpose. The place was rearranging what normal meant. I felt it in my gut, in the way my brain kept trying to explain the dry floor and failing. This wasn't a glitch. It was active, intentional, and we were about to follow it exactly where it wanted us to go. 60 feet, I said. We confirm, we get out. Aiden nodded once and started walking. The footprints stayed ahead of us the whole way. Every time my headlamp reached the farthest print, there'd be another one just past it, wet and clean like it had been made seconds ago. The spacing was wrong too. Stride length kept changing. Sometimes 2 feet apart, sometimes 4. No rhythm, no gait pattern. Aiden didn't look at them. He kept his eyes forward, one hand on the wall, moving steady. I stayed 3 feet behind him and tried not to think about how the tunnel had gone quiet. No dripping, no vibration from overhead, just our boots on concrete and our breathing. The corridor bent left, then opened up. Long room, maybe 40 feet deep, 12 wide. Ceiling higher here, 10 feet, maybe 12. No water on the floor, but the smell hit harder. Salt and rot and something chemical that burned the back of my throat. The whistle started again. Same 60 to 70 hertz tone, but this time it didn't cut. It held, steady, continuous. I felt it in my teeth, in my ribs, in the bones of my skull. Not loud, just present. Like the air had a frequency now. Aiden stopped walking. I stopped behind him. You hear that? I said. Yeah. The wall started vibrating, low, subtle. I put my hand flat against the concrete and felt it travel through my palm, rhythmic, pulsing 5-second intervals, same as the swells. I pulled my hand back. Aiden's headlamp swept the room, left wall, conduit and junction boxes, some open, some sealed. Right wall. Empty equipment racks with rust stains where gear used to bolt in. Far end. A metal door. Watertight seal around the edges. Porthole window at head height, maybe 8 inches across, glass thick and scratched. Behind the glass, something moved. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. Aiden grabbed my shoulder, but I shrugged him off and kept going. Headlamp fixed on the porthole. Seawater. Moving. Swirling slow behind the glass like a current was running through it. Kelp or something dark tumbling past the window every few seconds. I pressed my ear to the door. No sound. No pump hum. No flow noise. Nothing. There's no infrastructure for this, I said. Aiden was beside me now, staring at the porthole. For what? Water movement. There's no intake, no discharge, no pumps. This door's sealed, but there's ocean on the other side and I can't hear anything making it move. Maybe it's passive, tide-driven. We're 12 feet underground. Tide doesn't work like that. The kelp tumbled past again, except this time I saw it wasn't kelp. Too pale, too smooth. I stepped back. Aiden reached for the door handle. Don't, I said. He stopped, looked at me. Storage base through here. You don't know that. Coordinates match. This is it. Then we radio it in. We don't open it. Aiden pulled the radio off his belt, keyed the mic. Static roared out, then cut to silence. He tried again. Nothing. He clipped it back and turned the handle. The door opened inward. No water spilled out. The seal broke with a hiss and damp air rolled over us, colder than the tunnel, carrying that rot smell stronger now. Aiden's headlamp cut through the doorway first. I followed half a step behind. The bay was smaller than I expected, maybe 10 by 10. Concrete floor slick with moisture. Walls bare except for a single shelf unit on the left. The porthole we'd seen from outside was on the far wall, glass still showing moving water on the other side, even though we were inside now and there was no tank, no chamber, nothing to hold it. Just glass. An ocean. Moving. I didn't look at it directly. On the floor in the center, piled together, fins, black rubber, military issue. A mask with a cracked lens. A dive knife in a nylon sheath still strapped like it had been worn on a calf, and a helmet, sitting upright, full of water. The faceplate was fogged. Aiden crossed the room in 4 steps and crouched beside the pile. I stayed in the doorway, headlamp sweeping corners, checking for anything else. The helmet was the old style. Yellow fiberglass, comm unit on the side, faceplate held in with a metal ring. Water filled it to the brim, perfectly still. No slosh, and the fog on the inside of the faceplate looked fresh. Condensation, like someone had been breathing in it, recently. I moved closer. Aiden was examining the knife, checking the sheath for markings. "Don't touch the helmet," I said. "I need the serial." "Don't touch it." He looked up at me. "Why?" I pointed at the faceplate. "That's fresh condensation. Someone breathed in that thing within the last 10 minutes. Aiden stared. Then he leaned in, headlamp shining directly on the fogged glass. We both watched it. The fog started to clear, not evaporating, not fading slow, just vanishing in patches, like something was wiping it away from the inside. 5 seconds and the faceplate was clear. Water still filled the helmet, but the glass was clean now, spotless. I reached toward it, my hand stopped 6 inches away. In the reflection on the faceplate, my headlamp, my hand, and behind me, another figure, standing close, right behind my shoulder. I turned fast. Headlamp swung wild, nothing there, just the doorway. The tunnel beyond. Empty. I turned back to the helmet. The reflection showed the same thing. Me. Aiden crouched beside me, and the figure, still behind me where no one was standing. Aiden. He didn't answer. He was staring at the helmet too, face blank. A crackle came from everywhere and nowhere, sharp, metallic, like a radio keying up, but I could see Aiden's radio still clipped to his belt, talk button untouched. Then a voice, calm, even, familiar, Nora's voice. "Gordon, where's the binder?" Not a question, a statement. Her cadence, her tone, the exact way she'd ask for documentation when I forgot to file something. But wrong, layered. 2 voices not quite synced, and underneath, that wet quality, like it was speaking through water. I backed toward the door. Aiden stood up fast, hand going to his radio. The voice came again. Same words, same cadence. "Gordon, where's the binder?" It wasn't asking. It was testing, proving it could copy her, proving it knew her name, proving it could wear familiarity as easy as it wore Dale's breath on the inside of that helmet. I looked at Aiden. His face had gone white. "We're leaving," I said. "Now." Aiden stepped forward toward the helmet, hand reaching out. He started talking about Dale. Said the Navy needed confirmation. Said Dale's family deserved closure. Said we couldn't leave without proving it was real gear or staged equipment. I wasn't listening. Behind the porthole, the water bulged outward. The glass didn't break, didn't crack, just pressed out in a smooth dome like something heavy was leaning against it from the other side. The seaweed or kelp or whatever had been tumbling past was gone now. Just dark water and that bulge pushing forward. Then a shape. Pale, jointed, pressing flat against the glass. I tried to make it make sense, tried to see it as an arm or a leg or something human. But the joints bent wrong, too many of them. And the segments were too long and too narrow, and the whole thing tapered in a way that didn't match any limb I'd ever seen. The whistle cut out. The click started. Rapid, sharp, metallic. Same rhythm as the test sequence I'd sent from the pier 2 nights ago. 3 short pulses. Pause. 3 more. Pause. Repeat. My own sequence played back at me. I grabbed Aiden's vest and yanked him backward. He stumbled and nearly went down. I didn't let go, just dragged him toward the door while he was still trying to argue. I pulled the hydrophone rig out of my pack with my free hand, the portable unit. still powered on from earlier. I flipped the switch from receive to transmit and cranked the gain all the way up. Then I hit the broadband noise button. The unit was designed for acoustic interference testing, meant to flood a frequency range with random noise to see how systems handled it. I'd used it twice before on range work to clear out background signals. I aimed it down the corridor and let it rip. The sound was ugly. White noise roar across every frequency the unit could push. Loud enough that I felt it in my chest and jaw. Loud enough that Aiden clapped his hands over his ears and shouted something I couldn't hear. The whistle cut out. The click stopped. The vibration in the walls went silent. For maybe 2 seconds, the whole facility went quiet. Then it answered. Same broadband noise I just sent, but cleaner, sharper, no distortion or static, and aimed. I don't know how to explain that part. Sound doesn't aim. Not like that. Not without a directional array or focused emitter. But this hit us straight on like a punch. Narrow beam, all the energy concentrated in one line. My ears rang, high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. I dropped the hydrophone rig and it clattered on the wet floor. Aiden collapsed. He went down hard on his knees and then forward onto his hands. His whole body convulsed once and he vomited, thin bile splashing on the concrete. I grabbed his vest again and tried to haul him up. He was dead weight. His legs weren't working right. The water came back. It didn't flow in from anywhere. Didn't seep up through cracks or pour from a pipe. Just appeared, ankle deep across the whole floor in the span of maybe 3 seconds. Cold. So cold it burned through my boots. I got Aiden halfway to his feet. He was trying to help, but his coordination was shot. He kept listing to one side. Behind us, something splashed. I didn't look back. Just shoved Aiden forward into the corridor and followed. The ringing in my ears was so loud I couldn't hear our footsteps, couldn't hear the water, couldn't hear anything except that high-pitched whine drilling into my skull. Aiden stumbled every few steps, but he kept moving. I stayed right behind him with one hand on his shoulder to steer him when he drifted toward the wall. The corridor bent left, then right. I recognized it from the way in, but everything looked different now. The walls were darker, wetter, condensation running down in thick streams. We hit the equipment room and I aimed my headlamp toward the ladder. Still there. Hatch still open above with daylight pouring down. Aiden reached the ladder first and grabbed the rungs. He pulled himself up 2 steps, then stopped. Just hung there breathing hard. I climbed up behind him and pushed. He started moving again. Halfway up, my ears popped. The ringing dropped to a dull buzz, and I could hear again. Aiden's breathing. My own. Water dripping somewhere below, and the whistle. Faint, but rising. Aiden cleared the top of the ladder and crawled forward onto the rock. I followed him up fast. 3 rungs from the top I looked up and saw daylight and open sky, and a silhouette leaning over the hatch. Human shape, broad shoulders, rescue vest, one arm reaching down toward me. Gordon. The voice was calm, familiar. Grab on. I froze on the ladder. The voice continued. Nora sent me. Said you'd probably try to do the site check solo again. That's you. That detail. Nora had said that exact thing to me on a previous contract. After I'd gone out alone to validate a shallow hydrophone array without waiting for the boat crew. She'd been annoyed, but not surprised. Said it was typical behavior for me. Nobody else knew that story. I looked at the hand reaching down. The fingers were too long. Not by much. Maybe an inch, maybe less. But enough that my brain caught it and wouldn't let go. And the skin was pale. Soaked, pale. Like something that had been underwater for hours. I let go of the ladder. Dropped back down 2 rungs and hit the tunnel floor hard. My ankles jarred and I went down on one knee. Aiden was 10 feet away, crawling toward the scrub. The silhouette above shifted and leaned farther into the hatch opening. It flowed. That's the only word I have for it. Didn't climb down, didn't drop, just poured into the opening like water finding a drain. The whistle spiked. so loud I felt it in my teeth and jawbone. I grabbed Aiden by the vest again and dragged him backward, away from the ladder, into the equipment room. He was trying to talk, but I couldn't make out the words over the whistle. I scanned the walls with my headlamp. Conduit, junction boxes, fiber bundles, and a door. Small, maybe 3 feet high, recessed into the back corner behind a rusted equipment rack. Painted the same gray as the walls so it nearly disappeared. Emergency bulkhead. Had to be. I shoved the rack aside. It scraped on concrete and tipped over with a crash I barely heard. The door had a wheel handle. I spun it. Seized at first, then broke free and turned. I yanked the door open and shoved Aiden through. He went in head first, and I followed and pulled the door shut behind us. The wheel on the inside was stiff. I cranked it as hard as I could. My palms were slick and I lost my grip twice before it finally seated. The whistle cut to muffled vibration. I turned around. Service crawl space. Maybe 2 feet high. Rust-lined walls and ceiling. Condensation dripping everywhere. The air smelled like iron and salt and something rotten. Aiden was on his stomach a few feet ahead, breathing hard. His headlamp was still on, shining down the length of the crawl space toward a grate maybe 20 feet away. Daylight, visible through the slats. I crawled forward, knees and palms on wet concrete. The rust flaked off the walls where I brushed against them and stuck to my jacket. Aiden started moving too, slow but steady. 10 feet from the grate, I heard the whistle again, fainter, coming from behind the bulkhead door. 15 feet and I could see through the grate. Sand, scrub, open sky. The grate was held by 4 bolts, rusted solid. I braced my back against the ceiling and kicked. The whole frame rattled but didn't give. Kicked again. Pain shot through my heel and up my leg. 3rd kick and 1 bolt sheared. The grate shifted. 4th kick and another bolt snapped. The grate bent outward. I kicked twice more and it broke free. Crashed down onto the sand outside. I crawled through, palms on the sand, then knees. Then I stood up and turned back to grab Aiden. He was halfway out. I took his arms and pulled. He cleared the opening and collapsed on the sand next to me. My hands were bleeding. I looked down and saw the palms torn up, rust and concrete grit embedded in the skin. Didn't hurt yet, just looked bad. The sand trembled. Not a shake, not a vibration, just a faint shifting like something heavy had moved underneath. I looked around. We were on the east side of the outcrop, maybe 40 feet from where we'd tied up the skiff. The water was visible through the scrub, flat, no swells. I hauled Aiden to his feet. He was steadier now, got his legs under him and stayed upright. We stumbled through the scrub toward the limestone ridge. I kept looking back, but nothing came out of the grate. Just open darkness and that faint, muffled whistle. We cleared the ridge and hit the rock shelf where we'd landed. The skiff was still there, tied to the cleat, exactly where we'd left it. I untied the painter while Aiden climbed in. My hands were shaking and the rope kept slipping. Took me 3 tries. I pushed the skiff off and climbed in after. Aiden was already at the tiller. He pulled the starter cord once and the engine caught. Didn't sputter, didn't cough, just started clean. He turned us north and opened the throttle. I sat in the bow and watched the outcrop shrink behind us. The grate was still visible, dark square in the limestone. Nothing moved near it. My ears were still ringing, fainter now but steady. We motored for maybe 15 minutes. Aiden didn't say anything, just kept his hand on the tiller and his eyes forward. The main dock appeared ahead. I saw the antenna arrays in the water tower and the prefab buildings, and a truck on the access road. White, Autech logo on the door. Aiden angled toward the dock and cut the engine 20 feet out. Let momentum carry us in. The truck pulled up as we tied off. Driver's door opened and a guy in coveralls climbed out. Older, stocky, radio clipped to his chest. Dalton Cooper. I'd seen him in the commissary 2 days before, but we hadn't spoken. He looked at us, looked at Aiden leaning on the dock post, looked at my hands still dripping blood onto the planks. "You two need medical," he said. I nodded. Dalton keyed his radio and called it in. Didn't ask what happened. Didn't ask where we'd been, just called for triage and told us to get in the truck. Aiden climbed into the passenger seat. I got in back. Dalton drove us to the medical building at the south end of the facility. Kelsey Rivera met us outside, 30-something, pressed uniform, hair pulled back tight. She had a med kit already in her hands. She took us inside to a small exam room. 2 chairs, a table, fluorescent light overhead. Kelsey started with Aiden, checked his pupils, checked his pulse, asked him to follow her finger with his eyes. He answered her questions in 1 or 2 words. No. Yes. Don't know. Then she moved to me, had me sit and put my hands on the table. She cleaned the cuts with saline, pulled out the grit and rust with tweezers, wrapped both palms in gauze and medical tape. "You'll need a tetanus shot," she said. I told her okay. She administered the shot and logged it on a clipboard. Then she asked what happened. I looked at Aiden. He was staring at the floor. I told her, equipment failure. Said we had to abandon a site check and exit through a service crawl space. She wrote that down. Didn't push for details. Aiden sat with me for maybe an hour after. We didn't talk much. He kept his radio off and his phone in his pocket. At one point he said he was going to file a formal report. Said he'd include everything. The whistle, the footprints, the helmet, the voice. I asked if he wanted my photos. He said yes. I sent them to his email. The junction box, the conduit, the footprints on the platform, the helmet with the fogged faceplate. He thanked me. Then he said he had a binder. Documentation on Dale, personnel file, dive logs, last known location. He'd been told to keep it secure and hand it over only if we recovered something. I asked if he was going to hand it over. He said no, said he was keeping it. Evidence. I didn't argue. My phone rang around 1700 hours. Nora Hansen. I stepped outside to take it. "Gordon." Her voice was clear, calm, normal. "Just got a flag from Autech Safety. You okay?" I told her I was fine. Cuts on my hands. Nothing serious. What happened? I gave her the short version. Site check at a shore access point. Equipment failure. Emergency exit through a service tunnel. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then she said, "I didn't approve any shore work." I stopped walking. "What?" "You were tasked for offshore validation. Northern Array. 6 nodes. I got the schedule from Aiden Brooks last week. No shore access points on the list." I asked her if she'd signed off on confirm and contain work. "What's confirm and contain?" I explained. Aiden had said the Navy wanted to confirm what was down there and contain it. Said it was tied to a missing diver. Nora was quiet again, longer this time. "Gordon, I don't have any ONI contacts. This contract came through standard AUTech channels, equipment validation. That's it." I felt cold. Aiden said you approved it. I approved offshore work, hydrophone nodes, serial checks, nothing involving tunnels or containment. I looked back at the medical building. Aiden was still inside. I asked Nora if she'd ever told anyone about me doing solo site checks. "What?" I repeated the question. She thought for a second. "I mean, yeah, it's come up. You've got a habit of skipping protocol." I asked who she'd told. "Gordon, what's this about?" I didn't answer. She said she'd mentioned it in a couple of post-contract reviews, maybe in an email or 2. Standard supervisory notes. Nothing classified. I thanked her and said I'd call her when I got back stateside. She told me to get my hands looked at properly and to file an incident report. I said I would. She hung up. I stood outside the medical building for a few minutes. My hands were throbbing now. The gauze was already soaked through in a couple of spots. I went back inside. Hayden was gone. Kelsey said he'd left 10 minutes ago to file his report. I asked if I could go. She said yes. Told me to change the dressing twice a day and come back if I saw any signs of infection. I left. I flew out of Nassau 2 days later, hands bandaged, ears still ringing faintly. Nora had pulled me off the contract. Said Autech was handling the rest internally and didn't need civilian support. I didn't argue. I kept contracting after that. Took 3 jobs in the next 6 months, all offshore, all standard validation work. But I stopped running test tones at normal volume. Started keeping the gain low. Started logging everything I sent out and making sure I knew what I was pinging before I did it. And at night, back in my apartment, I kept hearing it. Thin whistle, 60 to 70 hertz, coming from the kitchen sink. I'd walk over and it would stay the same distance. Constant, unreachable. I'd turn the water on and off, check the pipes, put my ear to the drain. Nothing. But the whistle stayed, always there, always just out of reach,